In this video, we're going to start talking about food webs. Now, a lot of you have heard about food chains, but trophic levels, the levels of different organisms eating other organisms or being eaten by other organisms, are a lot more complicated than just a simple chain. So we'll be talking about these food webs. You should have some guided notes for this. Go ahead and make sure that you have those out. All right, so if we were to organize organisms in an ecosystem, if we were a librarian, we might say organize them alphabetically, right? We want to know where the different books are on, I don't know, armadillos, and they would be next to the bears, and they would be next to the cheetahs, right? ABC order. If we were a zookeeper, we might want to know, do they need a cold habitat? Do they need an aquatic environment? Do they need a daily delivery of fish? So we would probably organize them a little differently from our librarian friend. If we were hunters, we might want to know what season can we hunt them? Are we allowed to hunt them using a shotgun or bow and arrow? You could probably tell that I'm not a hunter, but we, depending on who we are and what our purposes are for our relationship with those organisms, we might categorize them in different ways. As ecologists, our main focus is how many of which organism is in this ecosystem. So that is our main focus. And we organize them by trophic level. Okay, and what we mean by that is who eats who. Okay, these arrows, this is a food web right here. You can see how it's definitely not just a chain. It's more of a web and a lot of interconnections between organisms. Okay, these arrows, it's important to note which way they're pointing, because the arrows represent the transfer of energy. Okay, so what this means is that this acacia tree is eaten by the giraffes and the rhinoceros, and the rhinoceros is eaten by the lion. So the energy from the rhinoceros will go into the lion, as will the energy from the deer. Okay, all of this energy came from something else. So all of these arrows indicate a transfer of energy, and this energy is transferred through eating. Okay. So what do we already know about trophic levels? Well, I assume that you've heard some terms relating to trophic levels. Some of you may know what a primary consumer is. Primary means first. A consumer is someone who consumes, right? Maybe someone who eats. Secondary is, well, something that comes after primary. Tertiary comes after secondary. How about a primary producer? A primary producer is actually the only kind of producer, and they produce their own energy. Can you imagine, or can you guess which organisms are primary producers in this food web? And these are not mutually exclusive, but an autotroph feeds itself, makes its own food. I'm not talking about in the kitchen, but using their own bodies, they make their own food. So again, which of these organisms can do that? Heterotroph, there's that troph word again. Autotroph, self-fed. Hetero means they have to go somewhere else, right? Fed by something else. Hetero means different. And then there's omnivores, which eat plants and animals. They eat different things. They're not super picky. An example of an omnivore might be like a bear. An herbivore, hopefully you understand what that is. That is a plant eater. And a carnivore, I think most of us know what that is a meat eater. Okay, an organism that eats meat. So let's take a look at the primary producers. These are also known as autotrophs. Hopefully you guessed that. They are able to feed themselves because, as we know from outcome 1, they are able to take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turn it into glucose as their own food using the light energy in a process known as photosynthesis. One byproduct, one outcome, or one byproduct of this process is oxygen that is released as a gas. The glucose actually stays in the plant. So that's actually really important to know because that's what gets eaten later on. Okay, water is taken up through the roots and is also released as water vapor transpiration. Okay, so primary producers make their own food through photosynthesis, and they provide the energy for the rest of the ecosystem, rest of the pyramid. We'll get to a pyramid in just a second. Well, here's our pyramid. They form the base of the energy pyramid. Okay, heterotrophs are not autotrophs. Heterotrophs are everything above these guys. They cannot do this. They have to consume other things. Okay, we are heterotrophs. Humans cannot make our own glucose. We have to go and get plants or animals to eat. So the primary consumers are those organisms that eat the primary producers. So in the energy pyramid, right, the trophic pyramid, they would be right above the primary producers. Primary consumers are going to be, by definition, herbivores. Okay? So things like the caterpillars, the zebras, giraffe, elephants, a lot of really big animals. Is that kind of surprising to anyone? Because they're eating plants, and we have this idea that plants don't have a lot of protein, right? They shouldn't be able to sustain a lot of large animals, but actually a lot of herbivores are very large animals. Okay, interesting side trivia fact. Secondary consumers. Okay, so we have primary producers, we have primary consumers, and right above them, the secondary consumers are the ones who eat the primary consumers. Okay, so here we have some kind of grass, which is the primary producer. The primary consumer eats the grass, and the secondary consumer, this owl, will eat the mouse. Secondary consumers can be carnivores or omnivores that eat herbivores. Okay? Fox is also an example of a secondary consumer. So that's the next level up on the trophic pyramid. Tertiary consumers, often apex predators. You can have higher up consumers beyond tertiary, but in general, we end up with just a few levels like this. If the organism is at the top of the energy pyramid, then we call it an apex predator, because the apex is right here, right? This is the apex is the tip of the triangle. Okay, right here. The apex, so if you have an organism that is at the apex of the triangle, we call it the apex predator for that reason. Apex predators and tertiary consumers are carnivores that eat carnivores. Okay, so primary producers at the bottom, then primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers come on top of that. This is my own little soapbox here. Do you think that decomposers should be included in food webs? Decomposers like bacteria and fungi end up breaking down a lot of the nutrients. So if a fox dies in the forest, the decomposers will take the fox's body apart, and they will absorb some of its energy, and they will also recycle a lot of other nutrients in the fox's body, and it will just kind of soak into the ground. So think about that. Should we or should we not include decomposers in the food web? And I'm going to leave this as a mystery because scientists are also they're also divided on this. but think about it. All right, so hopefully you were able to watch this amazing video about how the wolves changed rivers. In this, they mention, I think they mention, if they didn't mention, it is all about a trophic cascade. Okay, and what this is a change in the population of one species that significantly affects the population sizes of other species. So when we added the wolves, right, it had a trophic cascade and it affected the population sizes of everything else in that ecosystem. Not just the deer, but everything that came down or that was affected by the deer, including the plants, the birds, all sorts of things. I don't want to give away the punchline here, but it's an amazing video. Make sure that you watch it, maybe even several times. Okay, so this is called a trophic cascade. And finally, hopefully we will be doing this in class, but if you haven't, if you're just doing this to catch up, I would encourage you, strongly recommend that you go to your workbook, pages 23 and 25. There are different organisms there, and the activity that I would recommend would be to look at the cards and outline the cards in green if they're primary producers, and outline them in red if they're consumers. Okay, either primary or secondary or tertiary. See if you can note the ecological role. Okay, is it a carnivore? Is it a herbivore? Is it an autotroph? How many terms can you use to describe that that organism? But specifically, is it a producer or consumer, and what type? Okay, you can go ahead and cut out the cards from your workbook and create a food web from those 8 Yellowstone species. Make sure that you connect them with arrows showing the transfer of energy, and see what you come up with.